going to start with this, but really feel comfortable to stop me and we'll talk about something different. I will just say something briefly about my company. I'm very technical by training, so my family, everybody's a scientist. I became a mechanical engineer, then I became a nuclear engineer in France. They have an excellent research background in nuclear science. I studied in Cadarache in the south of France. Then I decided to be a researcher, so I started working for the government in the US, in Chicago, in a lab called Argonne National Lab. After 6 months working as a researcher, I decided that I didn't like that life, so I quit and I came back to Spain. And it was the crisis of 2001. I don't know if you were alive back then, but it was 2001. It was pretty bad. I thought I had 2 degrees and I had been living in 3 countries. I would have a very easy comeback. It was very tough, so I didn't find a job, and I started building software for a company. After 4 months, I decided it was also a shit job, so I called the dean of my university. I told him, after so hard I worked, all I get is this shit job, and I asked him, can you give me 2 names of 2 people who have done well in this company? And he gave me 2 email addresses, and I sent out an email on fire, like, I hate this company, and they were members of the board. So they thought I was funny, and they called me, and I told them I wanted a job in strategy, which is probably what most of you do or want to do. Strategy consulting. The company was Accenture, so it was not a small company. I did strategy work for about 2-3 years. I had never done an MBA, so I didn't know what a P&L was, or what a business was, or cash flow meant. So it was really good. And then I missed my scientific life, so I went back to work with labs, but I found the dream job, which is working with a very large network of research labs, of private research labs with around 8,000 researchers. And my job was to build startups with technology invented by other people. So all the boring side was done by other people, and I had to do the fun part. And then I became very confident with that, and I realized that technology is not worth the same everywhere. There are certain markets for everything. Like if you work in the movie market, you go to Hollywood and you probably can sell find bigger investors for that industry. So I started traveling a lot to San Francisco, and I realized that for my business, the same company with the same business model, same technology was worth at least 10 times more there. So I moved to San Francisco. I quit my job. I started working first as a freelancer, building companies for companies that I knew in Europe. And when I had 2 or 3 clients, I decided to incorporate my company. And I chose the week that Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. So another bad coincidence. I make my important life decisions in the worst periods of history. So I spent the first 4 months eating rice and not being able to fly back to Spain because it was very bad. And that's when you really learn what cash flow means. You can study cash flow, but you have to eat, according to your cash flow, and then you realize what it means. It's very good for your silhouette, though. So I built Opinno, and Opinno is a short name for open innovation. And open innovation is something that I'm really passionate about. It's the future of innovation. It's the future of collaboration. In Europe, we tend to be very collaborative and very polite, and everybody has to agree with everything. So if you ask a European to describe open innovation, they will say it's a common effort to build things together in a friendly environment. That's crap. It's not about that. So open innovation is what happens when people start leading companies early. Imagine you're in the 80s and you work in a lab, and it's a very well-reputed lab, and people work there for 20 years. I'm talking about, for example, the Xerox Park, the Palo Alto Research Center in Palo Alto. It was a very famous research lab. It's one of the most important in Silicon Valley in the 80s and the 70s. And they invented the fax machine, laser printers, LAN networks, Ethernet, all those things that you're starting to not use anymore. So people would work there for 20 years. And then the 90s come and internet starts picking up pace. And then there's a company called Cisco Systems. And there's a guy sitting at the door of Park Research Center. And people start coming up. And he says, what's your name? My name is Maria. And how long have you been here? For 20 years. How much do you make? 100,000. Okay, give you 120, you come with me. So they start stealing people because they need to grow companies faster. So people start leaving the companies, and with the people go with the ideas, all the intellectual property. So basically open innovation happens when you realize that the walls in your company have holes in them, and people and ideas and money can actually leave sideways, not only by having an idea, building a prototype, building a product, going to the market. And it's very interesting because it broadens the perspective of people doing innovation. And you realize in my lab I have this idea, this prototype, this new product, and I was only using it for this purpose. What if I license this technology to someone else, doing something completely different? Or what if I start hiring people from other industries to work in my company? So people start changing money, ideas, and people very, very fast. So when people are doing open innovation, the competitive scene becomes very, very hot. And the best response to open innovation, is to do open innovation yourself. If you are going to lose ideas, people should try to make an effort and build an intelligence to see where the smartest guys in the area are working, and try to grab them and have them work with you. And also the best ideas that are being created by someone else, try to grab them and use them for yourself. And then some really interesting examples happen, like Samsung. Samsung has been manufacturing screens for a very long time. And they've been even manufacturing screens for their competitor, for iPhone, for Apple. So the iPhone has been carrying Samsung screens for a very, very long time. That's a very interesting example of how a strategy of open innovation, if you're selling products to your competitor, is actually good for your cash flow. It helps you go faster. So it can be as aggressive as having you licensing technology or selling technology to your competitors. So it's very interesting. And when I was in San Francisco in 2008, I had an idea, which was, most of my friends in the 2000s were people who had survived the crisis of the dot-com boom in 2001. And what happened is that it reflects a lot with what's going on in Spain now, or in 2008, but in the year 2000 there was a lot of speculation, a lot of investment. People coming in with business plans and one sheet of paper and getting millions of dollars as an investment at a very high valuation. And then the internet crisis came, and people needed to learn to be a lot more pragmatic. People needed to build prototypes instead of business plans, and they needed to execute faster and cheaper than ever before. So the media industry, the internet industry, went through a very deep transformation, coming back to the roots of being pragmatic again, sharing a room with 5 people while you're building your product, and not going around on a Ferrari, with the money from your investors. So it became a very agile and competitive ecosystem. In 2008, before I founded the company, I realized that all these lessons that they had learned, people had learned in the Valley especially, everywhere in the tech industry, for the media and internet spaces, some telecom as well, were very useful if other sectors were going to be transformed. So actually the coming of the crisis in 2008 was nothing but an accelerator. It has forced many companies in many industries to adopt innovation and as a strategic thing and invest very heavily in innovation. And I'll tell you one thing, it's very different to talk about innovation with a marketing person than with a CFO or the CEO, okay? Before 2008, everything was flowers and everybody was happy. So when we talked about innovation and entrepreneurship, it was all about marketing and being cool. But when you're talking about innovation after 2008, it's innovation for survival. And in my point of view, it's much more interesting. Because if you're the guy delivering the innovation or the technology or the ideas, there's a higher chance of you seeing your ideas in the market and converting it into real products and having impact. So actually, it was not so bad. Being born after 2008 was a terrific time. Everybody's investing crazy in innovation. Every industry is very deep into the digital transformation, however you want to call it, but they're adopting technology as probably the main leverage of change and transformation in their industries. So we've been doing really well. We have grown organically. Very, very few small investment from families we know, but we've done everything by hand. Probably in Spain, in one of the toughest markets for this. And we grew from 1 person to almost 150 in 8 years. And I will talk about what's coming next for us. But to explain it in 1 minute before you see it in images and get distracted, we realized that we have 140 people working with us, but we have built a network of over 300,000 people that follow us. 30,000 people come to our events, 10,000 people apply to our competitions every year, 300,000 read our articles. And we are the publishers of 2 very important magazines, Harvard Business Review and MIT Technology Review, so our readers are very smart. So we realized, why don't we bring the economy, the collaborative economy model to consulting? And I think it was high time somebody did that. Because the consulting industry has been very traditional, and it's already very old-fashioned. People, 22-year-olds dressed in suits to pretend they're 30 so that you can charge more for them, which is actually what happens. This is why you need to wear a suit when you go to work for McKinsey. Pretending that they have the knowledge about what's coming next for their company. I'll give you an example. If you're involved in a project related to big data, in order to solve a big data challenge, you're probably going to need mathematicians, developers, coders, designers, maybe psychologists, maybe sociologists, anthropologists, if you're going to try to understand how people behave depending on the data. And I can tell you, for sure, no single company has that on payroll. No one. So it's very important that companies, especially in the consulting industry, because consulting is supposed to bring something new to the company, otherwise you don't hire them, right? They should be the freshest, they should be the most connected, they should have the highest turnover in the industry to remain relevant, to remain, to have interesting ideas and opinions to add to their clients' business. So we decided to bring the collaborative economy to our model, and we're going to try and go from 150 to 300,000, but not having people on payroll, which makes us very flexible and very competitive. We'll see how we do. Is there a place where I can plug my computer? Because otherwise it's going to run into... Okay, so I'm going to shift now. I'm going to be speaking about technology. If somehow you feel the former conversation was more interesting, just stop me and we'll start a talk and you can ask questions or whatever. Okay, so this is a talk I gave this morning about digital technologies that are going to impact probably every single industry in the years to come and are already actually doing so. I want to start by giving you a challenge. Something that really, I think it's the most relevant thing that's going on in my point of view. And it's, as an engineer, I have to show a graph. I only will show you one. Promise. Do you guys know what a logarithmic graph is? More or less? Okay. This is a graph of time. This is today, and this is the past. You see here the years, and you see that they are not linear. They're not like 10, 20, 30, 40. So this means 10, but this means 100, this means 1,000 years, this means 10,000 years, and so on. So you see that it's a way to compress time, okay? And this here are the most relevant events that have been happening on Earth since the appearance of life. I think there's at least eight different economists who have been looking at the data, and they have explained that each of those events has a similar impact on how the things changed on Earth, how we changed the way we live, and how the economy changed and the opportunities changed. And you see the appearance of life, the first cells, the mammals, humans starting to walk, Homo sapiens, the cities, agriculture, the printing press, industrial revolution, computers, personal computers. We don't even see phones or cell phones over there, but they're down there. And what I want to show you is that you see that there's a correlation. There's a more or less a linear correlation. The distance between these events in this graph seems to be the same. But I told you this is orders of magnitude more than this. And what I want to mean by this graph is that disruptive changes are happening in a shorter and shorter interval of time as we go towards the future. Imagine you live in the Middle Ages, and you're a guy who's been 30 years handwriting for the kings and has a beautiful handwriting in calligraphy, and then a stupid idiot invents the printing press, right? He doesn't even know, his hands are like that, he's not a good writer. But all your business is done. Everybody who's been doing that, I don't care how old you are, how much experience you have, you're obsolete. Okay, you would have to deal with this maybe once every 500 years. Okay, you can kind of find another job. But what if that happens every 50 years, or 20 years, or 3 years? What if that happens simultaneously in different aspects of your life, or different aspects of your company? It's very difficult to survive. So, the two main words I would like you to keep for your future once you end your studies, and you can write it on your mirror or on your desk, you can engrave it, with a knife, is these two words. Stay relevant. Please, always remember this every day. Technology changes things, and you will see through your life that the way people do things and the tools you use are very different. And business models change as well. Values, everything changes. And you need to stay up to date. And you have to ask yourself every morning, am I being relevant? Am I adding value to this game? If you're not, you're going to be put to the side. And I'm sure that on the graveyard or more of most companies, there are those two words, or one word, irrelevant, right? Microsoft may have beautiful products, but they're not relevant anymore because you cannot use them online. Or the diesel engine was beautiful and very, hipster, but we use electric cars now. So if you have not been able to keep up with change, you will become irrelevant. And this is true for you as entrepreneurs, as employees, but it's true for companies. Most companies die because of that. But I want to draw your attention to something else. Here, the curve goes, this is 100 years ago or 80 years ago. This is the interval between events. Basically, I'll read it for you, but about 80 years ago, the time between events was below 80 years for the first time. 80 years is the how to say esperanza de vida? Life expectancy of a normal human being. So I want to make you feel special. Since the appearance of life on Earth, you're probably the first or second generation on history that's going to live one disruptive change at least in your lifetime. You could be born here and never see one of these coming up. So your life would be the same, all from your birth to your death. But you guys are the first ones who are going to live at least once. This was 80 years ago. 40 years ago was 2. And now it's 4, 8, 16, 32 changes. 64 changes along your life. It's the first generation that actually has to cope with this speed of change. So, after stay relevant, my second piece of advice is the techniques, the ways of thinking, the methodologies that we apply for management today have nothing to do with what happened in the past. You're probably going to be facing not necessarily incremental problems that need incremental solutions. You're not going to be adapting only to changes of market share, or a price reduction, or an operational cost reduction, or a marketing campaign to gain X number of customers. You're going to be, as managers, and I guess this is why you're studying in such a good school and spending money, as managers, you're going to be facing decisions that are tougher than ever before. You may have to switch the direction of your company from here to here, or from here to here. And it's very important to be very brave for that. You will need a lot of self-esteem and a lot of coaching. So I recommend that you respect what's been done in the past, and you will use some of that. But some of the management techniques and strategies that you're going to need them are not written yet. So as entrepreneurs, it's very clear that you have to be adventurous and you have to write your own history and teach the world how a new thing is done. But as a CEO or as a VP or as a C executive in a given company, you may need those skills as well. So it's very interesting that you have a very close touch